So the term smart city is used to describe the proliferation of computers and network sensors into the built environment. Now, devices that can monitor traffic and things like crowding, things like air quality, contribute to the Internet of Things and the fact that there are now more objects connected to the Internet than people. Our phones already connect us wherever we go, but the increasing popularity of wearable tech is taking personal data to a new level. Administrative processes are also increasingly digitized. No doubt many of you today registered online to attend this symposium. So, all of these devices are generating lots of data, big data. And this is enabling us real-time insights into the city that have never been possible before. This is an old animation from the Center for Advanced Spatial Analysis at UCL, where I'm studying, and it shows the density of commuters through the London Tube system throughout the day, using Oyster card data. Nevertheless, sometimes it does seem like we are generating more data than we know what to do with. Carrot sits in our office and changes color whenever the tube status update changes. So for every life-changing application, there will be many that are perhaps less so, and experimentation is required, which is the fact that's really driving this trend for city governments around the world to host things called hackathons to try to generate these ideas. Now, the truth is that no individual or organization will know exactly how useful their data is, which is why the open data concept is so important. Although it does stretch beyond government data, open access to public data sets is particularly important. The reluctance of many city governments to engage with this idea raises issues of transparency, but also simply the fact that where privacy can be maintained, why should data sets that have been generated with public funds and maintained with public funds not be made publicly available? Nevertheless, I've worked for a city council, and it's not always so easy. There are a number of practical challenges dealing with this data. The most obvious one is that this data is by no means complete. The digitization of many of our processes is relatively recent, so particularly across time, we don't actually have a full set of data. And this is particularly challenging for city planning. As you know, cities are developed over decades and over centuries. The other problems that come up, obviously, old digital systems, huge amounts of effort have to go into cleaning that data to make it usable. And I'm sure, no doubt, many people in this room have experienced frustrations trying to join up data sets from different sources. I think it's something that all of us will experience. Now, what will these smart cities look like and who will build them? This is the control center in Rio de Janeiro, and it has live feed of videos, hundreds of cameras from around the city feed to those banks of screens, and a map which is analyzing data from sensors in the city 24/7. At the other end of the spectrum, though, you have a small non-government organization in India which has this online platform called I Paid a Bribe, and it allows citizens to report individual acts of corruption and crowdsources the necessary data to make real recommendations to government. And that is, in a number of examples, actually creating quite real change. So, are city governments ready for this new world? Building data literacy across the public sector is particularly important. So we have increasingly intricate digital models and digital maps that seductively mirror the real world. We need people who can use these tools whilst also recognizing their limitations. Are citizens ready for this new world? Unfortunately, without appropriate education, there is a risk that they might be left behind. The difference between someone with even a basic knowledge of programming and someone with none at all could be compared to an artist with a whole warehouse full of materials and one with only a ballpoint pen. It is quite a phenomenal tool. Is Australia ready for this new world? Well, before I left for London, the idea of smart cities as a concept seemed to not exist. However, I believe it's beginning to creep in. So, of September last year, the City of Melbourne appointed a Chief Digital Officer who's heading up a smart city office. And earlier in that year, they had received a substantial grant for consulting services from IBM. This headline came up only 2 weeks ago, Adelaide to become Australia's first smart city. And that article reports on a big partnership between that city and the international tech giant Cisco. So it's an exciting place for Australia to be. The relatively young age of our cities and institutions might make us more flexible And at least we have the opportunity to learn from some of these other cities who have started these initiatives first. Nevertheless, leadership is required. Do we have the people that we need to make sure the systems that we build are adaptable and that provide the functionalities that cities really need? Or am I on the phone to Cisco every time I need a data set updated, or that I need to buy it back? Are we creating systems that are focused on citizen control, or that will enable citizen participation? So to answer these questions and more, there's almost as much need for qualitative research in this area as there is for people who can program. Lydia touched on this earlier today, but the issue of privacy is particularly important. So people have shown that they might be willing to give up lots of personal data for services such as social media. Does this extend to public services? The European Union has an interesting principle in its data protection regulation, which talks about not reusing data except for the purposes it was collected for. And that's a very interesting statement in this era of big data, where we're also excited about finding new ways to reuse data to gain new insights. Nevertheless, the non-use of data also creates a number of moral questions. So if you're a city government that does not have a digital system like this one, which keeps track of infrastructure assets and where infrastructure is needed, in this day and age, you could be called irresponsible or incompetent. And earlier today, we heard from Dylan about the advantages of having digitized medical records and the kinds of insights that we can get from those to really improve patient care. So in summary, the smart city concept envelops an intensely interesting and exciting new phase in the development of our cities, and I am incredibly privileged to be able to study this with the help of the John Monash Foundation and also the Commonwealth Bank of Australia, who's my personal sponsor. My final thought with Australian leadership that I touched on before, I think that we need people who can bridge the divide between people who are very tech specialists, who know how the computers work, and people who are going to need to use them and the functionalities. And that's what I'm trying so hard to get my head around in the next 12 months, is to get at least enough skills to help bridge that divide. Thank you.